So let's talk about what your approach is. I know that you've talked about with me how you like to review the last year's financial metrics. What are you typically reviewing when you look at last year?
Okay, so it's the best place to start. The good news is we all have a previous year that just ended that you can look at, right? And you go, okay, this is the closest thing to who we actually are today. Um, I I really try to take a look back at the last 24 months, so 2 years. And if I use an average, they should be pretty similar. And if they're different, I should be able to identify why there's been some differences. Maybe a major account that either was acquired, maybe a major account left. Maybe there's a big investment you made in something and it's fine, like inventory or a space or a new office, and that can account for either additional costs or some new opportunities you can now deliver. But when I review last year's financials, the five things I typically look at is what was our gross revenue last year? So that's a place to start. Number two, I'm always looking at what was the amount, both percentage wise and dollar wise, in the gross margin bucket of that revenue. So after costs, what was I left with to pay my bills? I'm looking at my fixed cost numbers from last year. I tend to focus clear on my monthly average. I can look at the number for what it was for the whole year, take your total expenses. Yeah, there was a weird expenditure from a union audit on this month, or we had to pay something that month, but keep that in there. Don't take it out, and then divide by 12. And that's a pretty good indicator going into the year. You've put a little fluff in there, but my monthly average on expenses, earnings, what am I left with when all those fixed cost bills are paid? What was in the gross profit bucket? What was it? So I'm looking at percentages, but I'm also looking at real dollar amounts. And I'm just reflecting on all of those things. And then ultimately, sales by month. Nobody does the same amount every month. So if you're just going, well, we want to do $5 million, divide by 12, it's going to be $425,000 a month. It never works out that way. The great thing about the trade show industry is show schedules are pretty on cycle and predictable. So when I look back at the last 24 months, I can tell that 11.4% of my annual revenue came in January, and 9.9% of it came in February, and 10.3% of it came in March, and 7.3% of it came in April. Anyway, I could look at all that. I know we're going to take a deep dive in the summer months of July and probably August. So we're gonna plan to lose money and negative cash flow then.
Mhm.
We'll work like hell, hopefully, to find other things we can do to fill the gaps. But anyway, so when we take our annual number of what we're trying to achieve for the year, we will plug each month in by what our historic percentages are. If you haven't figured that out yet, in the trade show business, that's maybe one of the best tips I can give you to try and align your forecast with what you're actually going to be doing. Does that work in any other industries that you work with, Khalil, do you find?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you always. I just did this for my business. I'm not in trade show. I'm not in construction, but uh, I think reviewing these metrics quarterly, but also annually is really valuable, especially
Yeah.
for me. I find the fixed costs probably the most beneficial
Yes.
because it's the easiest to make a change really quickly. You can't just go and grow revenue that fast. Like you can't do that in the next hour, right? You
Yeah.
probably could, but not as easy, right? But in
Right.
the next hour, you can cancel a subscription, right?
Right.
You can do something to move that. And I mean, there's just so many small examples. Like I was able to reduce our monthly overhead by, let me think of the percentage here, about almost 10% in a matter of 3 days, just by reducing silly expenses, like looking at our T-Mobile bill, looking at our internet bill, looking at,
Yeah.
the softwares that we're paying for multiple seats when we only need one. And so that's a great one to look at. But I'm curious, you're reviewing these financial metrics. What's your objective when you're reviewing revenue margin, overhead, or fixed costs?
So
What's
really,
the objective?
when I look at the previous year and everything I just mentioned, um, it's a place to start on day one of the new year. What do I have to work with? I for some reason I'm 100% confident I'm going to get at least that much revenue back, right? And so if we go, if it's $5 million or 10, let's say it's $10 million, and we're running at a 40% gross profit average. I know that I'm going to have $4 million to spend, or approximately
Mhm.
325, 350,000, somewhere in there is what I can spend on fixed costs. I want to spend less because I want to have some left over. But my point is I'm starting off with the basic math equation. And now as we begin to make moves for the upcoming year, there's some things that are going to change. I love what
Yep.
you said. Costs are where you focus, because that's the second thing I move to. And that is, what is my current overhead? And
Mhm.
then, is there anything else in particular? So, for example, this past year, we knew our 5-year lease in our Orlando, Florida facility was coming to an end. Well, when you go back 5 years, when we negotiated that lease, we had, I think, the best square footage rental rates in town with a major commercial property company. We happen also now be with them in the Las Vegas market. But I was looking at, I don't know, a 79% increase from what I was paying, when it ended on August 31st, to what the new September rent. Really, because I negotiated that last August rent payment this past year, 5 years ago, right? And we all know what's happened with commercial real estate since then.
Yeah.
So there was a major, you're going to have a major increase in something like that, which is going to hit every few years. We know that insurances have gone up. We know vehicle insurance is up in the state of Florida by 30%. We know labor rates have jumped considerably in the last year. So anyway, I look at my fixed costs, so the first thing I like to, when I go through the general expenses, is I look at all the categories and I go, is this intentional? Is
Mhm.
everything here, did we choose this? And it's kind of like, if you're an individual, I know there's apps now that help you identify it, but you pick up your cellular phone, and how many things are being billed to you, an app, you tried it once, you didn't know it was going to be recurring. I mean, I've heard of people that have hundreds of dollars a month that are being billed through their phone and their apps, and they didn't intentionally sign up for that stuff. So I'm going through and I want to make sure that and I got a pretty good management team, but we talk about this stuff. Is everything on there intentional, or has some of it morphed beyond our plan, our intentions? Because that
Yeah.
can really throw off a realistic forecast, or get you in trouble. I want to know, when we're planning with my leadership team, who's watching this as we move forward? Who's accountable for that? And I'm talking with that. I have weekly meetings with a couple people in the finance group, and I just make sure people are paying attention and watching that stuff. So, and we do that so the rest of the team doesn't have to.